But one of the things that came out this past Thursday night is related to the notion that the Lord is good towards you. He has a hope for you. He has a future. And some of the times that we read scriptures like that seem blatantly obvious, there's a reason that He put them in Scripture. And it's because oftentimes we're going to encounter things in our life that are going to give us the opportunity to think the opposite way. It's like the song that we ended on. The chorus is, "You're perfect in all of your ways," right? And that's a great chorus to sing, but how many of us on a typical daily basis believe that to be true? Right? I don't mean conceptually. I don't mean just like, yeah, we know that's the right thing. I mean, you've experienced it to be true. Now, here's the deal. You can't actually 100% experience it to be true until you've already experienced it. So at best, on the front side of things, when you echo these things, you are declaring in faith that you believe the Lord to be good. But the only way that you prove Him to be good is by going through it and getting to the other side. Does this make sense? When it says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen, that's encouraging on one side, but not very encouraging on the other side. Because not only is it the evidence of what you haven't seen, it is the only evidence of what you haven't seen yet. Right? We think, man, He gave us evidence of what we haven't seen. And it's only His Word that is the evidence of what you haven't seen yet. It's one of those conversations that you have with somebody and you're really searching for answers, and they give you this piece of advice or what you think is clarity, and you walk away from that conversation going, that is awesome. They gave me the answers. They told me exactly what I'm supposed to do. And then you go to sleep, and the next morning you wake up and realize they didn't tell you anything. Come on now with me. Some of you have had that conversation. You've gone to counseling. You've told somebody, I really need help. And they've told you something, and you thought they gave you the answer. And you got excited, your emotions, everything, you felt goosebumps maybe, and you got all excited about it, and then you slept on it, woke up the next morning, and realized they hadn't told you anything. They gave you a declaration of what will be true in your life if you continue to walk down this road one step at a time. That's what faith looks like. It got real quiet. We're going to have to start talking about Italian food again. Good thing we didn't eat the Italian food first, or you all would be asleep. That's just what pasta does. So turn over to John chapter 5. This is a familiar passage, but I want to try to tie it into something that the Lord was showing me this morning, and just give us a little more of a peek into what His heart is, not only for us, but for the people around us. I see myself all over this scriptural passage, and I'll talk to you a little bit about it. I see myself on both sides of this equation, and so hopefully you'll get not only some enjoyment out of my foolishness, but also you can learn some things by observation so that you don't have to repeat the same things and mistakes that I've made. I'll stand up here as a living message for your learning so that you don't have to fall in the same pits that I've fallen into before. Nobody cares. All right, but I'm going to have to restrain myself from saying I told you so when you ask me to help you out of that pit after I've already explained the pit to you. All right? I'll do my best. I'll try to withhold my peace. It'll be like Paul when he tells them that if they get on the ship, they're going to shipwreck. And then they come to him like, we're going to shipwreck. And he's like, I told you so. He was trying to help them on the front side, but they decided to go with what looked naturally to be the right decision, and so they ended up in a mess, and then they were shocked that he didn't think he was surprised about it. It's like, hey, I know you guys told us about that thing, but we went with the best choice in the natural, and now we're in a mess. How come you're not surprised? because the Lord had already been trying to help them with what was going on. And that's what also came out on Thursday night. We see that Jeremiah, it's in Jeremiah chapter 29, we love those middle verses of the passage. We love that he has a plan for us and a future, and he thinks good thoughts towards us. But you have to realize Jeremiah spent 23 years trying to tell them that they needed to change course. So after 23 years, the word changes and goes, hey, because you haven't been listening to me for the last 23 years, you're actually going to be imprisoned for 70. But rejoice, because even in the midst of being in captivity, you're going to be able to multiply, have dominion, subdue the earth. And guess what? I have great plans for you. Have you guys ever read the preceding verses to some of these scriptures that we've been ingrained in us since the beginning? I was born in church, right? There are verses that I learned as a kid that when I started reading them the last couple of years, I'm like, I feel cheated. I feel cheated about this whole thing. You told me that if I give, you'd give all this crazy stuff back to me, but you didn't tell me how hard it would be to actually give the way that you give. You told me that if I loved, you would love, but you didn't tell me how hard it was going to be to really love the way that you love. All of these fluffy verses like, man, a new commandment I give to you, as I've loved you, so love one another. You're like, that is so awesome. The Lord loves me. I get to love other people. And then you realize what you did to him in the midst of him loving you. And you're like, oh no. I got to love people that way. Oh no. There's all of these hidden things that he deposits inside of you like little bombs. And there's a timer to them. Right? You receive it with joy and gladness. The seed goes in and you welcome the seed until the seed explodes inside of you. And then you realize if he makes you respond, once you've heard it, you become responsible for it. I'm like, seeds, let's just pull. I now know why I want to rip stuff out of my own soul and out of my own understanding. I don't want to really be responsible for it. I want to conceptually believe that everything that goes on here is his job. And if I just kind of walk along, then I can put it all off on him, escape personal responsibility, and then just go to heaven at the end. Oh, gosh. All right, so John chapter 5. Let's All right. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there in Jerusalem by the sheep's gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. Now let's capture this first verse, and then we'll set it aside, and I'll see if we can bring it all back around in the end. But it said, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Okay, so to set the scene, we have a feast going on in Jerusalem. And then the scene shifts to this gate called the Sheep's Gate at a pool of Bethesda that has 5 porches. In the next verse, we see that in these porches lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel came down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water, and whoever stepped in first after the stirring was made well of whatever disease he had. Now, we all know this scripture. This is a familiar passage, right? So what we have here is we have a feast, a celebration going on in Jerusalem, and then we have a bunch of people who are sick, disabled, lame, blind, waiting for heaven to come from somewhere else for them to get what they need. Because until that point, that's all that they knew to do. They knew that Jesus had not yet been manifested on the earth to that point, so the way that they saw heaven respond to their need was that at a certain time, angels would come down, stir the waters, and whoever got in first got the blessing. And then everybody else had to stay there, right? A certain man who had been there with an infirmity for 38 years. Wow. Thankfully, I'm not 38 years old yet, so I can't really imagine what sitting someplace for 38 years would really look like, but I imagine it to be a really long time. I mean, if I think back to everything that I've done in my life and I still haven't yet sat there or been around as long as this guy had been stuck waiting for the moving of the water, that seems like a really, really, really long time. Right? So Jesus comes in verse 6, sees him lying there, and knew that he had been in that condition a long time, and he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" What kind of high-level prophetic word is, "Do you want to be made well"? Hey, sir, I see that you're at the urgent care. You've been waiting in line for hours and hours and hours to be seen. Do you want to be made well or something? Yes, Captain Obvious, I would like to be made well. That's why I've stayed here for 38 years. The sick man answers him and says, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me." Was that the answer to Jesus' question? No. See, that man had been sitting there for so long that he couldn't actually hear what was being said to him. He could only spout out the answers that he had been formulating of why he was still where he was. Some of us have been stuck in places for so long, we've already formulated a theology of why we're still there. And we've backed it up with scriptures, and we've barricaded it, and we've blockaded it, and we've sandbagged it. And anybody that tries to punch a hole into why you're stuck where you are, we lob grenades back at them about why they don't understand the condition that we're in. Oh, Catherine, come quickly. So, right? You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. Why are you asking me if I want to be made well? Of course I want to be made well. I've done every 12-step program that exists trying to get well because somebody else got well that way. And Jesus doesn't care. Jesus responds to him and says, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." It's like they're having two different conversations with each other. The Lord is pressing the manifest button on this man's heart. The man is responding by vomiting out everything that really is who he is. And the Lord is taking that as his act of worship and responding to the very sacrifice that he's making. It's the equivalent of Mark 9 when the father brings his infirm son and says, "Can you heal him? Your disciples couldn't heal him. Can you heal him?" And Jesus says, "If you believe, all things are possible to those who believe." And immediately the man pushes all of his chips in the middle and says, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." In other words, here's the part of me that does believe, and here's the part of me that doesn't believe, and I'm going to push my whole heart in, believing that in Jeremiah 29, it says that if you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with all of your... You don't have to wait until all of your heart has been turned towards him to seek him with all of your heart. You just have to seek him with the good, bad, and ugly, even the stuff you don't feel like he wants, and push all of that in and believe that he can make up the difference. What if we've gotten worship all flipped upside down and backwards? What if the very question he's been answering us, or been asking us, has been designed for us to vomit up our very sacrificial act of worship so that he can breathe on the sacrifice and we can be made well again? So when Jesus says, "Do you want to be made well?" he knows what's inside of the man. He knows the man can only respond out of who he really is. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So the issues of his heart are being revealed, but not in a way that causes Jesus to shrink back and go, "Man, you need some counseling." It's in a way that he says, "Man, you really have a heart towards me." So Jesus just bypasses all of that stuff and says, you have bottomed out. You have gotten so frustrated about your own inability to make things happen for yourself that you're now ready for me to step in and do it for you. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked, and that day was the Sabbath. Now, what is Jesus doing during this interaction? He's gazing at the man the same way that he did the woman at the well in the previous chapter, because he knows if I can get this man's attention turned towards me long enough, he will automatically be transformed into my image, which is the image that he's called to. Because what we behold, we become. So no longer was he focused on all of the reasons why he couldn't get into that pool. Now he was focusing on the man that was operating outside the confines of the pool. Now here's where it gets crazy. I've been the guy stuck waiting for the pool to be stirred, and I've been the angel guy trying to stir the water so somebody else could get fixed. Did you know that Bethel actually means place of outpouring? I've been like the one-man stirrer for revival and outpouring. And the crazy thing is, it actually worked. Hear me. You can stir up anything you want with your gift, and it will still work. And somebody will jump in the pool, and they'll get transformed, and then they become your testimonial person about why everybody else needs to come to your pool. And then we get the whole thing messed up, because then we think people that need help need to be drug into a specific geographic region or destination, instead of realizing if we get baptized into it here, then we can go out and meet people right where they are. No longer do I feel the need or even want to try to stir something up and then announce that people need to come from wherever they are in order to get what's available here. Revival's not going to come by hubs emerging where everybody has to connect to the hub. I'm sorry. It's not going to come where there's outpourings and things in geographic locations and everybody has to get to one of those in order to take and get what they have need of. Jesus was using this man as an object lesson. Did you notice he didn't heal the whole multitude at Bethesda? Because if he had, then they would have all started following him around, waiting for him to stir the water. He picked one individual and to do it out of relationship, saying if you can fix your gaze on the person that has everything that you need and everything that you have need of, then you will actually be transformed into the identity that I have provided for you. It creates codependency if we stay in the old model. Because on one side or the other, we either need something and we go to somebody else to get it, or we stir it up for somebody else and then think they need to come back to us the next time they're in trouble. Man, when I finally learned this, I got a lot more relaxed. I didn't feel the pressure to help anybody anymore. Not in a bad way, in a very good way. I didn't minister out of order that created codependency on me rather than creating dependency on the Lord. People would come to me and they'd be in a jam and I didn't have to think up the best prophetic word or the right prophetic word to give them. Sometimes the best thing to do was to say, nothing. Does that make sense? So Jesus says, rise, take up your bed and walk, and he actually responds to him. Because the words that Jesus spoke to him, fixed with the gaze that he was connected with, gave him the substance or the evidence that he had need of in order to do the rest. Jesus didn't touch him, didn't pick him up, didn't help him to his feet. He spoke the word, and responding in faith to the word, healed him. And of course, Jesus did it on the Sabbath. But the reason that Jesus did it on the Sabbath is not because he was trying to offend the religious system. It's because he happened upon that guy in need on that day. It's a subtle distinction. We know that Jesus was all the time healing on the Sabbath. We see it as a point of emphasis because that's what really riled up the Pharisees. But he didn't go out of his way to try to offend the religious systems. He was like the Good Samaritan walking down the path, and as somebody was hurting or had a need that he responded to, it just didn't matter what day it was. The only people that had a problem with it were the ones that thought it was supposed to happen in a certain way, in a certain form, and with a certain function. Right? And if we get caught in that place of camping around the Lord coming in a certain revelation, a certain attribute, then we will be the ones that can't be happy for somebody that's been set free or healed because we don't think they went the right way to do it. Look at their response. It's on the Sabbath, and the Jews said to them who was cured, it is not lawful for you to carry your bed. Man, when I look at the scriptures, I'm like, I don't know how that guy held it together, right? He's been laying on a mat for 38 years. Do you know how awful, filthy, nasty that mat would be? Right? He was doing them a favor by cleaning up his trash. And they can't even be happy for him that he got healed and was walking for the first time in 38 years. They just want him to drop his nasty trash dumpster bed. If I'm that guy, I'm like dropping the mic and walking away. I am dropping my bed and saying, if that's what you have a problem with, you can clean it up tomorrow. What kind of insanity causes us to think that we know the Lord and to not be happy when somebody gets liberated, but think that they did it the wrong way? It's ridiculous. Who cares how you got it? Let me take it a step further. Who cares who you got it from? You know why? Because that's the next accusation. Said, who's this man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? And he said, I don't know. Wait a second. Somebody just got up, responded to a word from a stranger, got healed of infirmity for 38 years, and they didn't know Jesus. Because if you knew Jesus, you would actually be able to say, it was Jesus who healed me. The humility of Jesus to show up on the scene while everybody else is partying, doing the feasts, keeping everything in order, doing what they're supposed to do, celebrating and being joyful while a bunch of others are captive to waiting for an angel to show up so that they're no longer dying, blind, sick, and weak. And he comes in a nondescript form, and he pops in and says, hey guys, let me give you a quick object lesson. You don't have to depend on heaven to come from somewhere else anymore. The kingdom of heaven is at hand and soon will be in you. Then, instead of holding up the testimonial guy in order to start another healing crusade, he withdraws himself from the crowd. To this day, I wouldn't be able to do that yet. I'm just being honest with you. Right now, if one of you has been infirm for 38 years and you get healed today, I'm not going to be able to stay as silent as Jesus was about it. I'm not going to be able to just fade into the crowd and be like, well, that's what he's supposed to do. I'm telling you, I want to get there, but I'm not there yet. We'd put it on, we'd shoot a video in the thing. We'd shoot a video. We would. That's just what would happen. It's natural. We would shoot a video, we'd e-blast it, it'd end up on the Father's House Facebook page. We'd be tempted to hold meetings. I mean, there would be all kinds. And Jesus is like, it's no big deal because I'm trying to reveal a pattern to you rather than camp around something that you've seen one time. I'm going to reveal a pattern to you, and then I'm going to draw so that you don't try to set up a kingdom around what I just did. Every time he did something awesome, they tried to naturally set up what was only supposed to be done supernaturally. That's why when they tried to make him king, he withdrew himself. And he's been doing it in our political system ever since. So, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. He knew what was about to happen if word got out. So he sows the seed, the object lesson, gives everybody a chance to manifest, and then come to the realization that it's done now out of relationship rather than heaven coming from some far-off distant location. And afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." And since Catherine hasn't come in yet, I'm going to go ahead and break this one down at the risk. See, if you capture this in the heart of the accuser of the brethren, then you read it a completely different way than if you capture it with the love of Jesus, right? So the man doesn't know who healed him, and Jesus takes a special part of his day to re-engage with the man and give him some very simple instructions. It says, hey, see, you've been made well. You've been liberated from your captivity. Sin no more, which it means don't miss the mark again. Now that you have knowledge of the way things are, you're no longer held captive to that, so don't miss the mark anymore, lest a worse thing come upon you. Now, if you read that in the religious filter context, then you think that Jesus took time out of his day to go back and remind the man with an accusation of, hey, remember that sin you did 38 years ago that caused you to end up there? Don't you dare go do that sin again, because be sure your sins will find you out, and I'll put you right back there, and it'll be worse this time than last time. That's not a good father. That's not love coming to your door. That's saying, hey, I'm doing something new here, and now that I've released you from the captivity, it's for freedom's sake that I've set you free. Now that you have a knowledge of what I'm really like, and you're not dependent on a system of the Lord of heaven to come from somewhere else, I'm actually right here with you. Don't go back into that old model of thinking that someone else needs to stir it up for you. I want to have a relationship with you myself. Once you've been liberated from some of those things, once you've tasted of what he really wants to do with you personally and out of relationship, it is hell to go back into the system. You want to talk about a worse thing coming upon you? When you taste and see that the Lord is truly good, and you get liberated from that matrix of cause and effect where everything you do has a repercussion or an action or a consequence or a reward, when you get out of all that and you take the pill and you're out of the matrix and you realize that he's woven things to where you'll never figure it out unless you have his, then it's worse to try to set yourself back into that place of believing in knowledge, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What Jesus was saying in this scripture is, you no longer have to eat from the knowledge of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, thinking, why are you still here? Why haven't they helped you? Why this? Why that? What about me, Lord? All of that. And you can now eat from the tree of life, which has come to you personally to be in relationship. But if you choose to escape the personal invitation of relationship with him, You can go back into that old system, but it'll be even more bondage to you. It'll be more tormenting to you than it was before, because now you've tasted of what the truth really is. Does this make sense? So at the beginning, we talked about how at the beginning of this verse, there was a feast of the Jews going on. It was one of the times of feasting. It was one of the rituals that they went through. There's this time of feasting that's going on, and then in a separate camp, there's a time where everybody is paralyzed and sick and weak, right? Well, the Lord was speaking to me this morning out of 1 Corinthians chapter 11. You can flip over there. And I heard the simple phrase, and it just said, not discerning the Lord's body. That's how it started. I started reading through John chapter 5, and I heard him say, not discerning the Lord's body. So I flipped over to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, and this is the institution of the Lord's Supper is the subtitle here. But in verse 24, it talks about, when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And in the same manner he took the cup, saying, this is the cup of the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you'll proclaim the Lord's death till he comes. I think we all understand the symbolism of what the Lord was doing when he was here, and he was breaking his body and he was breaking the blood. He was signifying the crucifixion and all that would go on during the crucifixion. But he was also describing his body that continues to exist here on the earth today. And he says, take, eat, this is my body which is broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. I think we could all agree that when we look around, we see a broken body in the body of Christ. What's uncomfortable is to believe that it's broken for the benefit of the other people that you're connected to. This body, broken for me. It sets the bar to where nobody can be excluded. Because if I look at a body that's whole and without spot and wrinkle the way that I think that it is, then anybody that's messed up can't get into the club. So somehow a measure of my brokenness is for your benefit in a way that I don't even like talking about it. I would rather just achieve my number one destiny in the Lord without you. I really would. It would be much easier. I mean, the thought that I'm still in captivity so that you can learn a lesson doesn't appeal to my flesh. In the midst of your captivity, hey, you guys, for a long time, it wasn't the way that it was. But you didn't listen to me, so now I'm putting you in prison. But in prison, there's some really great things for you there. And don't try to prophesy yourself out of prison, because that just makes you a false prophet. If you read the chapters before 29, that's what happened. Jeremiah said, hey, 23 years I've been telling you, 70 years you're going to be in jail. And then somebody else had a better idea and said, nah, 2 years in captivity seems like enough. And it sounded like a good thing. Because the Lord is good. He's a good father. He wouldn't want you to be in captivity, so we're going to prophesy breakthrough. We're going to speed this whole thing up. It's an accelerated time. We're going to call it an accelerated season, and so we're going to come up with something good. We're going to make those 70 years 2 years. Except that guy died. Because he was misrepresenting the heart of the Lord, because he thought that the sign of the Lord's heart and nature of goodness was built around external circumstance rather than what he was doing in the heart. Who cares if your geographic surrounding is captivity? If he's there with you, you will be happy. Who cares whether you have a lot or a little? If he's there, you won't notice. We don't need to prophesy according to the external situation or circumstance, believing that the Lord would want us to do that. That only leads us down this false path of thinking that our physical surroundings is the key marker of whether he's in our life or not. His favor doesn't look like our definition of favor. You can't look at, this is the beauty of it. We have to get free of our control and our judgment and criticism, because I can't look at any person in and based on what's going on in your life, think that you're being blessed or being resisted by the enemy or anything in between. External markers have nothing to do with where the Lord is, what he is doing, what he's not doing. And he's perceiving that we've been in this for a long time. Because he gave us an object lesson over 2,000 years ago, and it's still easier for our minds to believe in the old system where he has to come from somewhere else, rather than believing that he's right here with us, and if we'll respond to his gaze, then we can be made well. This is my body, which was broken for each other. As often as you think about the Lord, do this in remembrance of that. We're much better at drinking his blood than eating his flesh. That's why he put it in that order. He knew we would be choking on the body, so that we had to drink the cup real quick to swallow it down. He thought of everything. He thought everything. He's like, they're going to need a cup to wash that stuff down, because you're supposed to eat the whole lamb, the whole body. My gag reflex is working. It offends me. There are parts of the body that offend me. Can we just be honest? It's a good thing I'm not in charge. I would have lost arms and legs and all kinds of stuff that didn't appeal to me at the time. Definitely ears. Mostly tongues. Verse 27, therefore whoever eats this bread or drinks this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. Let a man examine himself, so that he who eats of the bread and drinks of the cup, for he who eats and drinks in an unworthy manner eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. For this reason many are weak and sick among you, and many sleep. Here's the deal. If we get so focused on thinking it's just us and the Lord, and that's the important part, then we will try to consume and partake and drink and partake and drink and partake like a mosquito. We'll just move all around and we'll drink and we'll partake, and we'll be doing it in an unworthy manner because we're not considering the broken body that's around us and what he's connected us to. It's that same me focus that started this whole myth. So we know it's systemic. If it was the first thing that was introduced, we know that it's a theme that will be carried out until we completely get transformed. So the temptation is, even in the good things like remembering the goodness of the Lord, is to remember it in an application of how you think he's doing with you. When you feel like you're doing well, then you can take the bread and the body and you can be really thankful for what the Lord's doing. And if it's not going well for you, then it's really hard for you to enter in and think about the Lord because you don't think He's there for you. But what if drinking in a worthy manner and partaking in a worthy manner is being sensitive to the brokenness around us and realizing that if we begin to see those connections, if we see that love begin to transfer between a broken body, then that is a revelation of doing it in remembrance of Him. That was some of what Paul alluded to in 2 Corinthians 5 when he talks about that Jesus was in the flesh, but we regard Him this way no longer. The Jesus that we read about in here is now us. And if we do it in remembrance of the broken people around us, it'll create a thankfulness and a gratitude and a compassion that causes His grace to be sufficient for us and His power to be made perfect in our weakness. If we do that, there'll be people weak and sick among us and sleeping or dead. Because we won't be content enough just to feast on the Lord by ourselves when somebody else is hurt and dying around us. Remember? They were up doing the feast thing. They were doing their reasonable service. They were doing their worship stuff. And meanwhile, people were paralyzed and blind, sick and dying and weak at the porch. Jesus is so good to us and continues to be so good to us, He will still meet us through an inferior model, hoping that it will inspire us into the simplicity of just walking with Jesus. That's why revivals and outpourings and all that stuff still works, is because He's so desperately in love with us that He works all things to our good. So even when we settle for less and we work inferior models, He still comes that way, hoping to bring an object lesson or an inspiration that we can capture so that we can walk out in relationship from that point forward. What kind of Lord does that? How good do you have to be to work to humble yourself and work through inferior means in order to accomplish your goal of just wanting to walk with somebody? That's like me. That's like me being at home with my wife. And the only way that I can show her that I love her is by sending money through PayPal. Right? I'm trying to tell her every day that I love her, but she doesn't have the ears to hear. She only hears it when the bank account rings and there's a new deposit from PayPal. And every day, He will continue to make deposits into your PayPal account in hopes that you'll realize the person that's depositing it is right there in your room. Because He is love. He hopes all things. He believes all things. He keeps no record of wrongs. So He gets up every time that you get up, and He is happily expectant that today is the day the light bulb's going to click in your head, and you're going to realize He's been there the whole time. I don't care what He does for me anymore. I don't care if He bails me out. I don't care if He doesn't. I don't care if I stay here 200 years like I dreamed the other day or if I leave. I don't care about all that stuff. I don't care if people look at me and think I should be farther along in my progression, if I'm supposed to be more successful because I've been gifted. I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. We can be like Job. We can say, though you slay me, yet I'll praise you. We can say, I don't really understand where you have me right now, but I know if I'm there, you're there. And whatever it is, there's opportunity. Because here's the deal. Whether you do it the right way or whether you do it the wrong way, you're going to meet him. If Catherine doesn't come soon, I'm going to have to be forced to prove it to you. But 2 weeks ago, the woman in John 8 gets drug in. She's in the act of adultery, and she gets drugged before the king. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego do nothing wrong but mind their own business, and they get drugged in the path of the king. Whether you do the right thing or the wrong thing, you get drugged in the path of the king. I'm sorry, that phrase is wrong. It's not about the journey, it's about the destination. Who cares about the journey? When you get to the destination, you'll look back and won't even really be able to remember the journey anyway. The only time that Joseph could look back and say he meant all things for good was after it's done. Take it easy on yourself. You don't have to proclaim and chant that it's good and that he means it all for good when you don't feel that way. It's not faith to pretend. Faith is about being honest. Faith is about being real. He already knows. But the only way that you open yourself up to be known by him is through honesty and reality. And as you open yourself up in vulnerability and transparency to be known by him, then he will come into the very places that you always thought he never wanted. And when that begins to happen, then after he's already invaded that area, you can look back and say he meant it all for good. You can be like David. It's okay. You can feel spiritually bipolar. It's an okay thing. Because it was who he was. And if we can't be who we are, then we're sunk anyway. I've tried to be like other people. Other people have tried to make me be like other people. Anything in between, I have tried to be conformed into an image, and it doesn't work very well. Conforming to an image of the Lord's heart. No matter what great image it is. Conformity is not the Lord, period.